This is a message from the government of Bermuda.
COVID-19, otherwise known as the novel coronavirus, is changing the way we live, work, and do business in Bermuda. It's also changing the way we shop. Here are some tips for grocery shopping during the COVID-19 pandemic. Before you go to the store, consider whether you really need to go shopping. If available, consider delivery options instead. Don't bring the whole family, as only one person from a household is permitted, with the exception of single parents. Don't go if you are feeling unwell or have symptoms. If you are a senior or in another high-risk group, take advantage of senior shopping hours. Wear a mask or cloth face covering when going to the grocery store. Before going into the store, give your hands a good squirt with a sanitizer that contains at least 60% alcohol. Before you touch your cart, wipe it down with an antiseptic wipe. Most stores are now offering wipes for this purpose. While you're in the store, stay at least 6 feet away from other shoppers. While you're in the store, touch as few things as possible. Touch only what you buy. Remember to avoid touching your face. At the checkout, stand away from the cashier, and if possible, use the card tap option to pay for items. After leaving the store, give your hands a good squirt with a sanitizer, again, that contains at least 60% alcohol. When you get home, remove your mask or face covering the correct way. Avoid touching mouth, nose, and eyes. Wash your hands immediately after removing. Rinse your produce. It's always a good idea, even when there's no pandemic, to rinse fresh fruit and vegetables with water to remove dirt, debris, and pesticides, and reduce levels of foodborne germs. Don't use soap on your produce. There's no need to use soap or chemical disinfectants on your produce. Wash your hands again after you unpack your groceries. Wash reusable bags. If you use reusable grocery bags, you should wash them after a trip to the store, either by putting them in the laundry for cloth bags or using soap or other disinfectants for plastic bags.
This is a message from the government of Bermuda.
As a government, our priority is to protect lives and preserve the health and safety of our people. Yet it is also our mandate to create jobs and opportunities for Bermudians. Today, there is uncertainty surrounding COVID-19, and there is uncertainty around the economic future of Bermuda and the world. Today, we will give an update from the Ministry of Health, but we will also provide an update on government's efforts to protect our economy and to aid small business, and what we are going to do to prepare Bermuda for an economic recovery after the shelter-in-place is ended. This evening, I am joined by Minister of Health, Kim Wilson, who will be providing a COVID-19 update. I'm also joined by the Minister of Finance, Curtis Dickinson, who will provide an update on the economy, and we're also joined by the Executive Director of the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, Ms. Erika Smith, who will announce the small and medium-sized business relief package. I'm also joined here at the Barclay Institute by the Minister of National Security, who's on hand to answer any questions, in addition to the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Cheryl Peak Ball. First, there will be an update from the Minister of Health regarding the various issues surrounding the latest update regarding COVID-19. I do warn that the news that is about to be shared may be sobering to many, and I recognize that it will cause concern, but I also want to remind the public that there is a team of public officers and the government that is working day in and day out to make sure that we continue to control this outbreak. Minister Wilson.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Between late yesterday and today, there were 80 test results received. Of those, 24 were positive for COVID-19 and 56 were negative. Thankfully, there are no deaths to report. I can confirm that of the 24 new positives, 23 were associated with the outbreak at Matilda Smith. On one hand, this is a good thing about this finding because it represents that the cluster of transmissions is within the home, as opposed to untraceable transmissions within the community. But nevertheless, it is disheartening news As all concerned and out of respect for patient confidentiality, we will not share information on the number that were residents or staff. The public can be assured, as the Premier just indicated, that the public health team is actively working with the rest home to contain the situation for all concerned. I would like to remind the public that we must not put an emphasis on any setting or facility that is found to have an outbreak. This is a virulent disease, and its transmission is not the fault of a facility. We must be sympathetic to those affected and desist from putting additional strain on the persons having to manage the situation. With these new cases, Bermuda's total confirmed positive cases is now 81, and their status is as follows. 33 have now fully recovered. 34 persons are under active public health monitoring, but who do not require hospitalization, and 9 persons remain in hospital. The total deceased stands at 5. The average age of all of our confirmed positive cases is 56, with the median age being 57. And the age range of all of our positive cases is from 18 years to 91 years. The age of persons hospitalized ranges between 67 and 82 years, with the average age being 74. Out of the 81 positive cases confirmed to date, 36 are males and 45 are females. So regarding testing, one question which keeps coming up seems to be, why can't we test the entire population? The reason we are not doing this is because if we test people too early, the virus may not show up in the test and they could get what's referred to as a false negative. So for example, if someone were tested within a few hours of exposure when they had no symptoms, the test would not pick up the disease and they could get a negative result, which is wrong. Consequently, the individual, thinking that they did not have COVID-19, may go out into the community and spread the virus to others unknowingly. As previously stated, the government is implementing more extensive testing and will bring new testing capacities online next week. Our directive from the Premier is to increase our testing capacity to at least 500 per week, and we expect to be there by the end of next week, given the estimated timing for the arrival of further supplies. Until then, we will continue to test as aggressively as possible all persons referred by the hospital or a doctor and the necessary close contacts. We heard a lot last evening from the Chief Medical Officer about contact tracing. She detailed the many complexities of this process. One of those is people remembering where they have been and who they may have come in contact with over the past 14 days. This information is requested when they are telephoned by public health officers to do contact tracing because that individual has tested positive for COVID-19. Obviously, for the majority of the public, your daily diaries will look much the same while shelter in place is going on, with only trips to the grocery store or pharmacy or to exercise within that 1 kilometer or half mile from your home, unless, of course, you are an essential worker. But keeping a simple diary of where you have been each day and who you may have been in contact with is a very good way to keep track of your movements so that you have this information in hand just in case it's needed. Also, most phones these days have a tracking capability on them and can be used to generate daily or weekly reports for you. This is a good habit to get into now for when we come out of shelter in place, because contact tracing will continue beyond this period until this pandemic is under control globally. Other good habits to get into now are ones that keep you healthy, both mentally and physically. The healthier you are, the better chance your body has of fighting off the virus if you are infected. I recognize that we are limited with our options for physical fitness by the shelter-in-place regulations, but there are still many activities that still can be done. There's a lot of online workout videos. You can dance, you can skip, you can use indoor fitness equipment if you have it in your home. There's Wii Fit, and as well there's jogging and walking for 1 hour a day between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. within 1 kilometer distance from your home. Please keep healthy and look after yourself, because getting daily exercise is very important. Prepare healthy meals with lots of vegetables, have fun and experiment with new recipes, and avoid or limit the use of alcohol, and do not smoke or take drugs. The Ministry of Health is currently conducting an omnibus survey to gather statistics on people's health, stress levels, and healthy or unhealthy behaviors during this pandemic. In closing, I want to thank those who have submitted videos so far to the Who Are You Protecting campaign and that I announced yesterday. We have had some really lovely entries, and I look forward to sharing those with the public. A reminder that you can submit your entry via email to moh@gov.bm with the subject line, Who Am I Protecting? Or by WhatsApp to 504-6045. The deadline for submissions is Monday, April 20th, and this will be posted across social media and YouTube next week. And finally, I would like to appeal to residents to please follow the sheltering in place guidelines and directives. This means no play dates between your kids and other children in the neighborhood. It means no popping over to your friend's house who lives up the road and not having anyone in your house who does not live there. If anyone would like more details, they can be found on coronavirus.gov.bm. Shelter in place is a sacrifice for all involved, but it can be life-saving for every transmission that it prevents. So staying home helps to save lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Health. As I said yesterday, while we sacrifice, we cannot let the economic effects of this pandemic be worse than the health effects of this pandemic. The economic plan the government is putting in place will allow us to be agile and to move quickly. Bermuda, like the rest of the world, must continually assess our financial position and start laying the groundwork now, so that when the time comes to step out of our homes and eventually open our borders, we'll be in a strong position to move forward. It is our goal to use this opportunity not just to restore our economy, but to transform our economy, identifying new ways to elevate Bermudians financially and creating new opportunities for entrepreneurship and new careers. Minister of Finance, Minister Curtis Dickinson, will now give an overview of the items of which the Ministry of Finance has been working on and outline the economic plans for the country. Minister.
Good evening. Initially, I wish to offer my condolences to the families of those who have lost loved ones to this pandemic. I would also like to thank all of our frontline workers who are out there daily working hard, battling this pandemic, providing vital services, protecting our health and well-being, and keeping our island functioning. We are grateful for your dedication and commitment, and especially your bravery. On March 16th, I advised the general public on the actions being taken as part of the Ministry of Finance's COVID-19 fiscal plan. These actions were as follows: to obtain emergency financing to supplement reduced revenues and additional COVID-19 related expenditures, to provide additional funding to assist Bermuda's unemployed as a result of the economic impact of COVID-19, and to curtail lower priority expenditures to ensure that spending needed for COVID-19 matters can be maintained. I also noted that no spending reductions would be made that would jeopardize the health, safety, and security of the people of Bermuda. Bermuda's unemployed will be assisted, and fiscal prudence will be strictly maintained. To support these initiatives, the debt ceiling was raised by $150 million to $2.9 billion during the final sitting of the House of Assembly. And at this time, net debt stands at $2.68 billion, leaving the government with approximately $220 million of borrowing capacity. Additionally, the ministry has executed a $20 million credit facility with a local financial institution and is in the process of finalizing another $150 million facility with other local financial institutions. This borrowing capacity, together with current cash reserves, will assist the government in taking appropriate actions to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 in the short term. To assist people out of work due to the economic impact of COVID-19, the government has quickly introduced an unemployment benefit. The Ministry of Finance has worked closely with the Department of Workforce Development and our local banks to ensure that as soon as possible, money was available for unemployment benefits. We recognized that time was of the essence. I'm also pleased to announce that additional manpower from other parts of government will be marshaled to speed up the process and get much-needed funds to our families that have found themselves displaced by COVID-19. We've responded quickly to this crisis and have used the tools and resources at our disposal in a meaningful way to provide much-needed financial assistance to our people during this unprecedented time. As of this week, the government expects to have paid benefits to just over 5,000 persons at a total cost of approximately $8 million. We recognize the importance of continuing to help our people through these challenging times, and the unemployment benefit will provide temporary assistance by providing financial support to meet people's basic needs. In the recently conducted 2019-2020 fiscal year, the Ministry of Finance has provided increased emergency funding of $2.8 million to the Ministry of Health to fund personal protective equipment, testing kits, and testing equipment, among other things. Additional funding has also been provided to the Ministry of National Security in the amount of $450,000 in order to embody the regiment and provide quarantine facilities. A further $171,000 has been provided to the Ministries of Public Works, the Ministry of Legal Affairs, and the Department of Information and Digital Technology for other COVID-19 matters. To assist businesses that have a pressing need for financial relief, on April the 3rd, the government announced that several temporary emergency measures were instituted, which included extending deadlines for tax filings and deferring or possible waiving of fees, taxes, and penalties. In many parts of the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has negatively impacted companies of all kinds. Small and medium-sized enterprises have not been spared. Many SMEs, the business models depend on face-to-face contact and a physical location in order to drive their business models. With the current crisis and the shelter-in-place order, these businesses have suffered significantly and have experienced job losses. Small and medium-sized businesses are an essential part of the Bermuda economy. The Bermuda Economic Development Corporation is currently doing their part to support these businesses through COVID-19 and beyond. I can advise that the government will provide support in the amount of $12 million to enable the BEDC to provide resources to expand the programs now being run to assist small and medium-sized enterprises. At my press conference on March the 16th, I noted that the future was not clear, but that we did anticipate that there would be economic and fiscal consequences for Bermuda stemming from COVID-19. I advised that the implications for Bermuda would likely include slower growth in Bermuda's economy, a rise in unemployment, a downturn in visitor arrivals, and reductions in consumer spending, retail sales, and government revenues. A recent OECD Interim Economic Outlook reported that the coronavirus has put the world economy at risk, and that the public health measures to suppress COVID-19 will cause a severe economic shock in all directly affected economies. The economic consequences are forecasted to be extreme in the short term and could be severe in the long term if governments get their economic policy responses incorrect. Early signs imply that the economic hit will be considerably worse than the global financial crisis. Predicting the exact scale of the economic damage at this point is difficult due to continuing uncertainties. During the global financial crisis, the deepest contraction in the Bermuda economy was 5.6% in 2009. The 2009 recession was the most severe one to have affected Bermuda since the 1930s. In line with most other countries, we expect the contraction in the Bermuda economy in 2020 to be worse than in 2009 due to COVID-19. The ministry is in the process of getting economic modeling done by independent parties. In the 2019 economic review presented in the House of Assembly on Budget Day, I reported that the island's economic growth in 2020 was estimated to expand by 1 to 2%. COVID-19 impacts have made this projection no longer valid, as it has disrupted most sectors of the Bermuda economy. By way of example, the total number of persons to be paid unemployment benefits as of this week is just over 5,000 persons. This represents approximately 15% of the 35,393 persons working in Bermuda. The tourism sector has been left with major challenges due to travel bans and cruise ship cancellations. Business closures during the shelter-in-place order mean that economic activity has slowed dramatically. After considering the impact that COVID-19 could have on all sectors of the Bermuda economy and the level of unemployment, the Ministry of Finance, working with the Caribbean Regional Technical Assistance Center, otherwise known as CARTEC, has revised our growth forecasts from 1 to 2% to -7.5% to -12.5%. It is important to note that this is a preliminary projection, is based on reasonable assumptions, and is primarily dependent on how long intensive suppression measures remain in force. The IMF, in their World Economic Outlook on April the 14th, have predicted the global economy will contract by 3% in 2020, with the U.S. 5.9%. The economic impact of COVID-19 will also have severe knock-on effects on the 2020-2021 budget. The combination of lower fiscal revenues and higher public spending will no doubt cause the projected budget deficit of $19.8 million to increase. The Ministry of Finance COVID-19 fiscal plan calls for a re-examination and reduction of lower priority budget expenditures to ensure that spending needed for COVID-19 matters are maintained. In line with the zero-based budgeting methodology we introduced this fiscal year, the 2020-2021 budget will require a revised alignment of the allocation of resources to tackle the threats posed by COVID-19. To that end, over the next 3 months, government will delay the start of any capital projects that have not commenced. This could save between $10 to $15 million. Institute an immediate freeze on the funding of vacant posts that are not required to address COVID-19 or to protect Bermuda's national interests. This could save between $10 and $15 million. Continue the ban on non-essential government travel, which could save between $1 and $2 million, and reducing all discretionary spending, including training, materials and supplies, clothing and uniforms, etc., which could save between $3 and $5 million. We understand that the economy must be addressed. However, we must make it clear that the government's #1 priority is managing this health crisis. The Ministry of Finance recognizes that to navigate appropriately through this crisis, we will require the input and advice of all stakeholders in the community. Accordingly, as I mentioned in my March press conference, the Ministry of Finance will increase its monitoring of global economic conditions and its interactions with stakeholders in the public and private sectors to obtain views from business leaders about industry sector performance and their outlooks. This will assist in the development of our economic recovery plan from COVID-19. Additionally, the Ministry of Finance has already engaged with the Fiscal Responsibility Panel to seek their feedback. Further, on April the 10th, the Ministry of Finance and the BMA convened an emergency meeting with the Financial Policy Council. The purpose of this special meeting of the FPC was to provide a forum for preliminary discussion and advice to me as Minister and the BMA on the possible impact of COVID-19 developments on the financial stability of Bermuda. The scale and speed of the economic recovery in Bermuda will depend critically on the economic policy actions taken now. To build on the momentum from the FPC meeting, I can confirm that I will be establishing a COVID-19 Economic Advisory Committee. The committee will include key stakeholders in the Bermuda economy and community. They will provide advice to me and will help to get our economy moving again. As I said previously, the Ministry of Finance recognizes that to get through this crisis appropriately, we need the input and advice from all, including the general public. To this end, the Ministry will be setting up an email address as well as the online government forum where you can submit your ideas, your suggestions, and your vision for the revitalization of our economy in the post-COVID-19 world. The email address and the launch of the online government forum section will be announced shortly. Finally, the Ministry is also working with the Caribbean Regional Technical Assistance Center and the International Monetary Fund to observe what other measures are being implemented by countries in the region to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. Our economy will change, and the government will change to take the challenge head-on to create outcomes that benefit the people of Bermuda. Yet as the government will have to change, businesses will also have to change, and our people will have to be ready to change and embrace change as well. The old models may no longer work. The old thinking may no longer be relevant, and the old way of doing business may not be what Bermuda needs to survive and thrive in the new reality of our global economy. In closing, I would like to once again thank all of our essential workers and everyone who is on the front line, working day and night to ensure our health and well-being. We are grateful for your sacrifice and dedication, and we give thanks to all of those wonderful people keeping us safe, keeping the island operating while putting their own safety at risk. Thanks also to those businesses and individuals who are generously donating funds, resources, and supplies to assist in our efforts to fight this virus. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Finance. As an entrepreneur, I'm keenly aware of the many challenges that are facing many of our businesses. When you tell me that you're struggling to maintain health insurance for your staff or cover other expenses during this time of reduced business activity, I get it. It is heartbreaking to see hard work slipping away and your businesses stuck at a standstill. I believe in bottom-up economics, and it is the small business owner who hires 2 or 3 others who will need ongoing support as we transition from this pandemic into a fully operational economy. The BEDC has been working with agency partners to help our small business owners. I will now turn the podium over to, or the mic over, to Ms. Erika Smith of the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, who will present on the resources being put in place to assist them this time and give more details on the distribution of the $12 million in funding, which has been made available by the Ministry of Finance. Ms. Smith?
Good afternoon. I want to thank the Premier and the Minister for inviting me here today. On March the 20th, BEDC announced that with the support of its Board of Directors, it would reallocate funds from its existing budget and modify its existing products and services, at least for the next 9 months, to be able to provide local businesses, owners, and entrepreneurs with support during these uncertain times in the wake of COVID-19. Funds have been allocated to provide support to general business owners, existing clients who have already BEDC products, and new entrepreneurs who may be seeking financial support. The funds have been allocated as follows. We had reallocated $350,000 from our existing operations programs budget to our capital budget in order to increase our capitalization to $2 million. This has allowed us to have an increase to $1 million in direct lending from BEDC to entrepreneurs. We have also increased our guarantee to $12 million in order to issue guarantees to financial institutions for bank financing. We have reallocated $100,000 from our existing budget to provide access to businesses, to external expertise support in accounting, legal, and marketing services, and that will help to right-size these businesses once COVID-19 passes. We have facilitated the creation of an idea pool where businesses can write in with recommendations and suggestions on how we, as BEDC and public authorities and departments, can assist. We also amended our payment terms to be able to pay all of our current vendors on a weekly basis so that they are not disenfranchised and they actually have access to cash. We are also acting as an intermediary, connecting existing consumers and buyers with sellers, as businesses will have to have an underutilized inventory. And then BDC is also acting as an intermediary to form partnerships between businesses to see how they can share resources and reduce overhead. I want to speak about our existing and new financial applications and clients of BDC. Before COVID-19, we had an existing direct microloan product, and we have increased that from $20,000 to a maximum of $30,000. That is a direct loan that does not require any collateral or security. We have also reduced our interest rates by 1.5% to 3% and 3.5% respectively. Compared to the financial institutions, this is probably the most affordable money on the market right now. That applies to both economic empowerment zone businesses as well as general businesses island-wide. And microloans can be used for working capital purposes and in some cases capital purposes, depending on what the request is. All existing microloan clients and new clients have had their existing loans with BDC restructured, and we've introduced a 3 to 6 month interest-only payment for those clients. Existing clients have also had the option to extend the repayment terms from the maximum at the time was 24 months, but now we are offering up to 42 months to make those payments to be affordable. We have increased our guarantee provision up to 75% of bank loans with a maximum of $300,000 for that guarantee. That has been a 15% increase of our now new capitalization at $2 million. That's a help to many businesses that are looking to the banks to assist with additional financing. For the first time, BDC is now considering guaranteeing financing from other entities outside of the financial institutions, as long as they meet our KYC AML requirements. That could be individuals, private entities, credit unions, or companies who are willing to allocate funds towards lending to businesses. We have reduced all of our fees by 50%, the only exception being our vending license fees, which will need some legislative amendments, but we do have a creative workaround. We have reduced our loan guarantee fees by 50%, and we have also absorbed the cost of credit check fees so that no client will have to pay for that fee. Entrepreneurs that operate seasonal businesses will now have the option of having recurring interest-only periods for the life of their microloan with BDC, and that's a new provision that we have instituted. Any new microloan that we do approve right now will have a delay in its repayment, its first date of repayment from the drawdown of its loan, by at least 3 months, and that can be extended to 6 months. So conceivably, if a business receives some financing from BDC and it's a loan, they won't have to start paying back for at least 6 months after they get the funds, which will give them some time to right-size their business. And to help retailers, we have also increased our maximum credit line with the Customs Department on our letter of credit product from $10,000 to $12,500, which will allow retailers to establish a credit line. BDC would be the guarantor and allow them, when they're up and running, to import retail goods without having to pay the duty for a period of time. In addition to those financial products, we're also providing advice and support, and we know that this is also an opportunity for businesses to pivot, to see COVID-19 as an opportunity for new types of businesses. And so we are also offering seminars, quarterly seminars at a free cost to all businesses, and we've reduced our fees for multi-week courses by 50%. In addition to all of the aforementioned provisions, We also indicated that we would be working with the Ministry of Finance, and of course, I'm very grateful for the announcement by the minister today of the additional $12 million. I can tell you that we have completed jurisdictional reviews of other countries. We have completed a survey of local business needs to determine exactly what businesses need. We are actively holding and participating in webinars to assist businesses and connect them with each other. We are, of course, acting as an intermediary between business and government departments for assistance to businesses when needed. We're continuing our outreach with regard to our radio shows so that we can engage and inform businesses. We are actively restructuring our current loan guarantees with the financial institutions, and these are 15 businesses that have already received funding from BEDC. And we are also restructuring our microloans that were in place before COVID-19, and that is 51 businesses who have microloans with BEDC. Over the last 3 weeks, we have received through various mediums such as social media, emails, phone calls, hundreds of requests for advice and direction, and of course we are providing that as soon as possible to everyone that reaches out. We have had constant meetings with the banks to firm up some of the new provisions we want to have in place with regard to the increased guarantee. And we also are recommending for the first time to offer guarantees for overdraft facilities. So that is something that BEDC has never done before. We are also talking with the banks with regard to allocating lump sums of guarantee funding to the banks for pre-approval of applications in order to speed up the process for decision making. We have compiled all of the current government departments' relief and assistance, so we've reached out to most government departments. If anyone goes on our website, they can see the reliefs that are currently in place. And we've also done the same for the financial institutions so that businesses have access to that knowledge and information. We know that the government is providing excellent assistance, but everyone is willing to pitch in, and so we are having discussions with the private sector also on additional financial products to support small and medium-sized businesses. And as of today, right now, we have 100 new applications that we received for direct financial help, and we are actively processing those applications as we speak. I want to thank the government for the additional support and its understanding and responsiveness to help shore up our local SMEs with what is going to be needed to help them tread water and get through COVID-19 and come back post-COVID-19. The additional $12 million in funding to support local small and medium-sized businesses is supplementary to our current $1 million in direct lending and $12 million in guarantees that we currently provide. And that breakup of that additional $12 million will be made up of direct grants from BEDC to supplement loan financing that's already in place or will be approved, direct loans from BEDC to add to the existing loan capacity that we have, guaranteeing loans at the banks, and that will probably focus more on medium-sized businesses who probably would take up the bank financing over the direct finance. We'll try to prioritize the direct financing from BEDC to more of the small businesses. And then, as I said, guaranteeing for the first time overdrafts with the banks. And we see overdrafts as a way to get financing to businesses in a much more quicker way than a traditional loan. The focus will also be on the immediate overhead and working capital needs that the businesses are facing right now and they need to address in order to stay afloat, such as payroll, rent, utilities, insurance, and required fees. As I've said, microloans and guarantees for loans are already in progress, and so businesses have been and can apply right now. And as I've said, 100 businesses have already applied. Details on how we will allocate the additional $12 million will be released this Monday, April the 20th, and that will detail how the additional funds will be allocated to grants versus loans versus overdrafts. We are also holding a webinar on Monday, April the 20th at 3 p.m. to walk businesses through the process of applying for the product so that they can understand step by step what is needed and what they need to get through the process. Although BDC's office is physically closed, we are all working at home and we are all contactable by our phone numbers, by telephone, by email, or by web conferences. We have the ability to receive and process applications and provide business advice, and are doing that since March the 18th. So any interested business owner who needs support should contact us at 292-5570 or email us at info@bedc.bm, or they can go on our website at bedc.bm. BDC is committed to helping businesses, and of course, with the support the government is showing its support for local small and medium-sized businesses. This is a very difficult and trying time, but I do believe that we can come through this together, and we are committed to doing whatever we can to show our businesses to be on the right side of this post-COVID-19. And I just want to reiterate that our support is not just for small businesses, it is also for medium-sized businesses as defined in our act. Thank you for this time.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Smith. The Bermuda Economic Development Corporation has been hard at work, and this $12 million additional of assistance to our small and medium-sized enterprise will certainly go a long way. I thank them for their continued work and their efforts. I know that they have continued to work remotely and have continued to serve our small business community and assisted even some small businesses during this time to expand as they change their business models. Economic recovery is not just about the government. Bipartisanship is necessary. And as we move forward, the Minister of Finance has indicated that he will making sure that we are going to involve not only members of the government, but also members of the community and also members of the opposition inside of this particular endeavor. Keeping with my pledge that I made to the opposition leader to make sure that the opposition is informed, there was a meeting earlier today sharing the preliminary modeling information with the Minister of Health and her team. There will be another meeting that's going to be held later this week for members of the opposition to ask additional questions in addition to the sitting of Parliament, which will take place later this week. However, it's important to note that the government's outreach when it comes to dealing with matters of the economy will not only involve politicians, but it must involve all of you as well. In order to collect thoughts from Bermudians as we move through this COVID-19 era and look to transition our economy, the government has set up an online forum where members of the public can share their suggestions. The questions that are being asked are, what laws would you like to see modernized, reformed, or introduced to the benefit of Bermuda as we move past this pandemic? And what are your ideas to stimulate economic recovery, create jobs and opportunities for Bermudians once the emergency shelter-in-place order ends? The questions can be found on forum.gov.bm. Again, that website is forum.gov.bm. And this is going to be administered by the Minister responsible for communications, Minister Jamal Simmons. And this is an opportunity for us to put our collective heads together as we develop ideas that create jobs and stimulate the economy. So while the Minister is forming an economic advisory council, we want to make sure that all Bermudians can play their part in feeding in to this particular endeavor, as it is going to require significant change as we move past this particular period in our time. Earlier today, the Minister of Labor, Community Affairs and Sports, Minister Levita Fogo, announced the cancellation of Bermuda Day activities, which will include the half marathon and the parade. I know this was a disappointment for many because Bermuda Day for Bermudians signifies the unofficial start of summer. However, the decision was made this far in advance out of an abundance of caution to ensure the continued health and well-being of everyone on the island. Before I go on to brief updates provided by the Minister of National Security, I would like to speak to those who may be suffering at home with domestic violence. Unfortunately, when you have orders such as shelter in place, you will unfortunately see an increase in the risk of domestic violence. If you are in an unsafe situation, have any concerns for your safety, If you're being abused emotionally, sexually, physically, contact the police or call the Center Against Abuse at 292-4366 or their 24-hour hotline on 297-8278. If you're in a situation where you feel unsafe and you can't get to a phone, please feel free to leave your house and go to the police or make sure you report it at one of these checkpoints. The last thing that we want is persons to suffer in silence at home under the hand of domestic abuse. This government is committed to giving you the support which you need to get out of an unsafe environment, and we will work with our community partners to ensure that you and/or your families can have a safe environment during this crisis. Please do not suffer at home. Earlier today, I received an update from the Minister of National Security, and I will share a few items. The Royal Bermuda Regiment continued their deployment across the island, providing support in a variety of capacities. In conjunction with the Bermuda Police Service, the community advisory points recorded a total of 10,899 stops over a 24-hour period at 20 various locations across the island. Of these stops, 311 were advised to return home, and one person attempted to evade a checkpoint. In conjunction with Bermuda Police Service Marine officers, soldiers of the Bermuda Coast Guard continued to maintain a daily presence on Bermuda's waters. Some of yesterday's Coast Guard patrol activity included redirecting boater activity back to shore as the shelter-in-place regulations forbid boating activity outside of commercial fishing. The Royal Bermuda Regiment continues to provide support for the transport of hospital staff via the Department of Transportation public buses. A quick note regarding the issuance of exemptions for the next 14 days of shelter in place. The Minister of National Security is working on a process for people to have their exemptions extended for the further 14-day period without having to reapply. The Minister will be providing additional information on this point tomorrow. In the meantime, please refrain from applying for the extended 14-day curfew period until otherwise notified. Turning to the government-run shelter facility at the Cedar Bridge Academy, which continues to operate on a 24-hour basis. We are reiterating our call for medical volunteers, nurses, and doctors for the shelter. The contact number for nurses and doctors to volunteer is 707-2223. Again, that number is 707-2223. We did have an incident at one of the government quarantine facilities. This involved the arrest of a person who was under quarantine and found in possession of a controlled substance. This individual will go through the appropriate court process. Yesterday, I announced that the shelter-in-place order will continue until May 2nd. The rules which have guided actions over the last week and this week have not changed. Our overall aim is to save lives by limiting the transmission, by reducing non-essential movement of everyone in Bermuda to ensure that the number of COVID-19 positive cases who require hospitalization do not overwhelm the hospital. The only way we can do that is by persons following instructions and remaining at home. On Friday, Parliament will meet and will be passing the extension to the emergency order related to shelter in place. There have been suggested modifications that, while maintaining social distance and shelter in place, will help to address some of the concerns that you have expressed surrounding the services available to the public. Those details will be provided by the Minister of National Security at tomorrow's briefing following the conclusion of the Cabinet Subcommittee meeting tomorrow. The enforcement of social distancing is one of the key public health measures that will reduce transmission of this highly contagious disease. And as a reminder, until the shelter-in-place ends on May 2nd, you must still remain on your property and can only leave for the permitted uses. And if you do go outside, continue to maintain your social distance and make sure that you wear a face covering. Before I close, I just want to note one thing. I did understand that yesterday, an Instagram account that belonged to me was cloned. I want to remind all persons in Bermuda that you will never be asked for money by a government minister or anyone in government online. Do not send money to anyone through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or any social media platform. And if you have any concerns about any messages you have received, please send an email to stopcybercrimes@gov.bm, or you can visit cybertips.bm. Before I close, I'd like to take a few minutes this evening to say my customary thank you to each and every healthcare professional who is on the front line making sure that Bermuda is effectively dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. To every person who works in public health, to every doctor and nurse who's working in our hospital or out in the field, or those in private practice, I extend the country's appreciation to the grocery stores, the pharmacies, the gas station, their staff, together with the dock workers, and also the truck drivers who are transporting our wares from the docks to their individual locations. I also have to mention the public officers who continue to provide services for the government of Bermuda, and the very hard-working team at the Department of Communications who put on these press conferences and make sure everyone remains informed. In addition, I'd like to thank our team here who are also providing services to the hearing impaired. The government and the people of Bermuda are truly grateful for the dedication of all the hardworking professionals who continue to make sure that this country runs. And from my office to all of you, I want to say thank you, and please continue to keep up the excellent work of which you're providing to all of us. With that, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Mr. Premier, Ministers, thank you for meeting with us. Some questions on the economic stimulus. Some of these are a bit crystal ball. I guess I'll start with, as you've said, it's difficult to predict, but does the government have any projection on how many businesses might not reopen after the conclusion of shelter in place? And what's looking like the worst hit types of businesses?
Thanks for the question. No, we don't have any data at the moment on the number of businesses that have been impacted. I would say that I think that businesses that are service in their nature have been particularly hard hit because they do not have the ability to directly interact with customers the way they traditionally have been. So restaurants, bars, the hotels, I would dare say landscapers, pool cleaners, providers of household services, they've all been hit fairly hard because people are not allowed, due to the shelter-in-place order, to go out and do their normal work.
Thanks, sir. If the stimulus package to small and medium businesses includes government loans, and forgive me if I didn't catch it, what's the interest rate, and will business owners need to give personal guarantees on those loans?
Erika?
Yeah, no, so there isn't any guarantees with regard to BDC direct loans. The interest rate is 3% for businesses within the economic empowerment zones and 3.5% for businesses outside. That has been a reduction of 1.5% from our regular microloans. So for those cases, there aren't any personal guarantees required with BDC. If they are getting a loan from a financial institution, BDC's guarantee will kick in at 75% of that loan, up to a maximum dollar value of $300,000.
Thank you for that. I'm told that the Premier and the Minister of Finance had a conference call last week with the Chamber of Commerce. We were hoping to hear what the impact that has had on the stimulus package that has been announced.
Well, Jonathan, what's been announced today is specific actions with respect to the BEDC, and me making the announcement that I will be forming an economic advisory committee. What the Chamber did in their meeting with the Premier and myself last week was share some of their thoughts around particular items that they think might be worth considering. Those items will be considered more fully once I get the Economic Advisory Committee up and running, and I'm expecting that I will receive a wide range of ideas and suggestions on ways to move the economy forward, and would want to give all of those ideas proper consideration.
Thank you, sir. So we've got the 12 million stimulus package. Again, forgive me if I missed it. Was that reallocation of budgeted resources, or was it from credit facility?
So it's money that we have allocated to the BEDC in an effort to help them provide support to businesses that may be suffering on the back of this pandemic. It was not budgeted because I don't believe that any of us had the foresight to believe that this pandemic was going to be as bad as it was. My recollection is it was declared a pandemic after the delivery of the budget. So this is not in the budget, but we are trying to adapt as best we can to provide support for those who have been negatively impacted by the pandemic.
And so it entails a reallocation of budgeted resources.
It's a combination of reallocation of budgeted resources and borrowed money.
And borrowed money, right, so. Quickly moving on. There have been a couple of hints at new ways of doing business that are intriguing to hear. We've heard it again today. I guess, can you walk us through a bit more of what potentially, again, it's a crystal ball question, but what you're thinking of in lines of a new way of doing business for Bermuda once this is over?
So, Jonathan, I'll say this. In the preparation work that was done to deliver a budget, I never contemplated that we'd be dealing with this. And I would say that most of us would probably agree with the following statement. None of us thought that we'd be dealing with a pandemic, and none of us had kind of in our contingency plans done any work around how this would look and how we would behave once it had happened. It has happened. And we're now challenged to kind of figure out for ourselves how we're going to come back from it. In the normal part of me doing my job, I have always asked the question, is there a better way to do something? Some folks would say, are you trying to change for change's sake? And I say no, but I think it is always legitimate to test the underlying premise around anything that we do. More often than not, the way we do things is appropriate, but there are opportunities for us to kind of change and evolve. The example I often give is the abacus, the thing that you move the balls across left and right to kind of add. We now have electronic abacuses. They're called smartphones with applications on them. That represents an evolution. This opportunity, this pandemic, provides us with a unique opportunity to try to reposition ourselves as a jurisdiction, to look at what we do well, to figure out how we can do it better, to kind of jettison some things that we may not do well that we've always done because we've always done them. And so I think instead of looking at it as all bad, it could be an opportunity for us to kind of reinvent ourselves and become even more relevant into a new world. One thing that I would say is that this pandemic has changed the way that we all operate. And I think as a result of that, we need to be adaptable.
Thanks. Quickly moving on to some health-related questions. That's unfortunate news about the seniors' home. How are you able to tell us how we're looking in terms of the potential spread that may have gone from that home to other homes in terms of tracking down the context? Is it too early, or are we able to say does it look like it's contained?
I think it's a little bit early, Jonathan. Some of the results we really just received a couple hours ago, so the contact tracing is still ongoing. You would have had the opportunity to have heard from the Chief Medical Officer yesterday describe in detail the process, the intimate process involved in contact tracing. So recognizing that a few of the results came back a couple hours ago, we're still in that process, but certainly more information will be provided to the public as and when it becomes available.
Thank you. And are we headed towards any flattening of the curve? Can you tell us a bit about where we are in these sort of graphs that we're seeing in other countries? Do we know that yet?
When we spoke about the modeling, I think the Premier alluded to the modeling that's taking place yesterday with respect to Public Health England and the Imperial College in London. It is anticipated that we will have the completed modeling completed by the weekend, and at that point the Premier has indicated that that information will be made first and foremost available to the opposition, which we did share with them today. Actually, as the Premier spoke about earlier, we had a conference call with them and shared the modeling, but upon completion of that information will be made public so that they can see what the trends are and what the modeling expectations are based on interventions and the like.
Thank you, Minister. I'm told that government officials in New Zealand took a pay cut, the senior government officials, as a show of solidarity with the public. Is that something that we are considering doing here?
I think you heard from the Minister of Finance that everything needs to be on the table. We're going to be considering everything. It's not going to be something that's going to be easy, Jonathan, as we go through this. It's going to be a lot. And when the Minister of Finance says that we have to look at everything, we have to look at everything. And so I think what's most important for us is to focus on the new reality, and for us all to be working together to get to that new reality, because it's going to come at us very quickly.
Thank you. And lastly, with rest homes in the hospital, the staff still have to shop. Are there any plans to perhaps serve them in a different kind of way, separately perhaps, or anything that can mitigate the risk of when they do have to go out and shop for themselves, that they're not exposed to any risk of passing anything on or picking anything up?
Well, as has been discussed previously, they do shop by alphabetical order, but they also have, I believe, are considered as essential services. So there is a specific day in which they are allowed to do their grocery shopping as members of the essential services. You would have heard Dr. Richmond speak yesterday to the issue as it relates to them wearing their clothes out in public after they've knocked off, and that they are encouraged to either cover up, or alternatively, facilities are being made available for them to change their clothes before they depart their work shift.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jonathan, just to expand on that, I think that it is an important point which you asked. I think that the news of this, which we received about 4 o'clock, was something that was particularly challenging. I have directed the Minister of Health and the Chief Medical Officer to make sure that any type of aggressive actions which are necessary for containment of this are necessary. There will be aggressive testing of any contacts, certainly. We will look to make sure that we can do any testing if there's persons who worked in more than one particular rest home. What I can say is that there's a concern as to whether or not persons are actually who may or may not have been infected were returned back home. I don't know if the Chief Medical Officer wants to add any particular details, but they were at the beginning of when this outbreak was noted, and they were the first tests being offered accommodations that may not have been in their homes if they were not able to sufficiently quarantine or self-isolate at home. So Chief Medical Officer, I don't know if you wish to add anything on that.
That's accurate. Individuals who are at risk are quarantined. Those who are symptomatic are isolated, and the option to have that quarantine and isolation take place in a really safe government quarantine facility is there. And we're in the very earliest day of assessing the full extent of the problem, but I can say that consideration has been thought of, and we're working to make that available for all individuals who would need to be quarantined or isolated securely from their families.
Thank you kindly.
Yeah, good evening. Minister Kim Wilson. Has that second rest home, the staff and residents at their second rest home been tested? This particular rest home is 3 times bigger than Joseph Smith. Have the staff been tested, or are they going to be tested? Staff and residents, as a matter of fact.
I'll yield to Dr. Peekball, but the particular home that you're speaking about, the individual that did test positive was a transmission from outside. It wasn't a transmission within the home. And as Dr. Peekball indicated yesterday, for public health reasons, unless it becomes necessary to disclose the identity of that home, i.e. persons become test positive within the home, then that will not take place until that happens. This particular individual was, the contact took place outside of the home. It was not related to the home at all. That just happened to be a place of their employment, and those persons that had close contact with that individual, the contact tracing is taking place, and they will be tested appropriately. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. One more question for you. Any thought of revisiting the restrictions on loved ones that family members are at end of life in the hospital? Right now it's restricted for anyone to even go in. This is something that is being heavy on some of these individuals.
Certainly. Actually, I think that's a little inaccurate. The hospital has publicized, and it's on their website, and in fact, almost, I guess, 7 days ago, they actually did a video announcing what their visitation policy was. And I can tell you that it includes persons that are end of life, it includes visiting children that are in surgery, having surgery, excuse me, as well as parents, fathers of mothers that are about to give birth. So that is not actually correct information.
Appreciate that. Minister of Finance, any thought of seniors at the present are depleting their savings? Any thought of them drawing down from their private pensions to help them stay afloat? And especially with some of the tenants not being able to pay, they're depleting their savings.
So there are currently provisions in the pension regulations that allow for hardship withdrawals. We are considering, as part of the relief from COVID-19, expanding the basket of hardships. The policy development is still relatively early, but we are looking at pensions as a way to provide liquidity to individuals, whether they be seniors or otherwise.
Thank you. With this form of assistance for small and medium business, will this be a financial grant or bailout?
Well, you heard the executive director of the BEDC talk about loans and grants, and so there has been no characterization of bailout, and that we're not using that language in terms of how we're designing or applying government funds to provide some degree of support.
So my question is, and then my second question is, with these loans that's going to put these businesses in further debt, how is this going to assist these small business owners, small and medium-sized businesses?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And so part of the $12 million will go towards grants to cover some of the shortfall in revenue, lack of revenue, as well as some of the expenses that have already been accrued by businesses. So once we're able to address some of that, then the loans will be able to help with regard to any existing shortfall after that. We're recognizing that businesses are going to have some challenges in paying it back. So we're instituting these provisions with regard to delayed payments, right? To give businesses as much of a breathing space as possible, not just with our loans, but also with the guaranteed loans that we have with the financial institutions. Obviously, we understand that this is an unprecedented time, so we're going to be working with businesses throughout. And of course, we are anticipating that some businesses are not going to be able to pay it back. And so we've already made some calculations on some of the defaults.
Is Minister of Finance, is reductions in duty being looked at as an option to help bring relief to retailers?
In my budget that is now largely obsolete, there was a discussion around making the process by which retailers could apply for duty relief or duty deferment. We're trying to streamline that process. As I said earlier, we're looking at a range of options, but we have to be mindful that part of the revenue that is gained from duty is used to fund the government, and so we have to be careful that we don't create another problem by trying to solve one. So we're looking at a range of options, and in as much as there are ways to create win-wins, those things are things that we will consider strongly, but we have to be thoughtful about this stuff.
Business owners might argue what they need is relief, and what's been presented today does not provide relief. How do you
Sorry, Trevor. I have to push back against that. The Minister of Finance just offered and just stated that there's a $12 million small business and medium-sized business relief package, and the executive director of the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation just stated that there's going to be a significant number of grants that are comparable to things that have been given to other countries to assist small and medium-sized businesses. So I think that it's very difficult to say that we are not necessarily providing relief, when the fact is that yesterday I said that when we come here, we're going to be announcing a relief package. And the fact is that there are going to be a lot of small and medium-sized businesses that are going to be helped by this, and it is going to assist them during this point in time by continuing to pay their health insurance, possible rents, and other things for their employees who they may not be able to have that cash flow right now. So I do not accept that this is not relief.
Okay, but you were more detailed just now in your presentation that wasn't spelled out just now.
That she laid out all of that, Trevor. That was inside of her statement.
Okay, my last question. We haven't heard anything about international business, and what are they saying about the commitments in doing business during post COVID-19? What is it about the international business saying to government about?
I've had significant interactions with international business or their industry groups. They are very supportive of the government. They are very interested in trying to find ways of helping. Their presence here is testament to their commitment to the island. And I don't have any doubts around them wanting to be here once COVID-19 has passed. My expectation is that as I form this Economic Advisory Committee, the international business will play a prominent role in providing advice to me and its membership.
Don Burgess, Bermuda Broadcasting. The health minister or the chief medical officer, with the 24 new cases announced today that were positive, how much pressure or how does that change things going forward in dealing with this?
As you can imagine, as I mentioned yesterday, the contact tracing and the case management have intensified considerably. In fact, I should be helping my staff right now do that. There is quite a lot of detective work, very tedious work with individuals, with their contacts, with their visitors, with their families. So that has to unfold. So I would say that the work has increased considerably, and we expect that that will continue to happen as COVID-19 impacts the community. We expect that there will be cases that are similar to this that will require a considerable amount of assistance. And we mentioned yesterday that GoData GoData software, which will help us to do a more efficient job, I think, of doing this contact tracing and case management, because it does get very unwieldy. The good part is that at a certain point, you get the picture. The information is able to be interpreted, and you don't have to do quite the same level of contact tracing and case management continues. So we are working very, very hard now, and we anticipate that we're going to have to continue working extremely hard. But we're hopeful that the automation of some of the process of contact tracing will come on board very quickly and make some of that a bit easier.
Along with using the GoData platform, helping track down those last, I think it's about 12 people that we don't know how they've contacted it. How is that going to help speed up that process?
Well, that will actually help do some of the detective work more quickly, because right now you're sort of literally drawing connections between individuals in the community, but once it is in the software, much of that is automated, so it's much quicker. So the anticipation is that it would be a help.
Thank you. Can I add, Don? Thank you, Dr. People. One of the advantages to public health with respect to the enforcement of the shelter in place is that it makes it very, very easy to do contact tracing. Provided the persons are doing what they're supposed to do, which is to remain at home with their immediate family members, then it's an easier process to contact trace, as opposed to, as you can appreciate, if we had not entered into the shelter-in-place requirements.
Thank you. Mr. Finance Minister, it seems clear that the lowest earners are typically those with the weakest savings will be hardest hit by this pandemic. Can you offer any extra reinsurances that the lowest earners will get adequate government help?
Well, we've committed, Don, to ensuring that people's basic needs are met and that the most vulnerable are high on the top of the list in terms of providing a solution in that respect. The unemployment benefit is a way for people to get some money in their pocket to provide basic needs for food. Inasmuch as this lasts for more than the 12 weeks that we anticipated, we built the program around, then folks can avail themselves to financial assistance. And so there are government programs in place to provide support for the most vulnerable.
We're now in the second, or we will be in the second phase of the shelter in place. So going forward, if we use up the 12 weeks, will something else have to be instituted to keep this going, or will be re-examined closer to the end of the 12-week period?
We'll have to see how this goes, Don, and if it's proposed to extend beyond 12 weeks, we'll have to give consideration to kind of how do we extend the program.
Do you share the view with some business leaders that the longer we are in this lockdown, the more severe and prolonged the damage to the economy will be?
As a general matter, yes, I would agree with that. The lack of economic activity will have a drag on our ability to kind of get restarted, and so it's starting from a lower base, and we'd rather this be as short as possible, but we want to be safe.
How is the number of people that you gave today that was collecting the unemployment benefit because they're not working, creating this drag on the economy?
Well, economies like activity. In as much as there's activity, then there's a concept called the multiplier effect. So a person goes to work, they make money, they spend money in the grocery stores, they spend money on clothing, they go on vacations, they buy gas, they have discretionary spending, in as much as they go to eat dinner. So as a result of shelter in place, folks aren't going out to have dinner, folks aren't going to bars, people who work in bars have to pay rent, and it's a kind of a domino effect. And so what you do when you put shelter in place into effect is you dramatically slow down the pace of movement in the economy. The longer it goes on, the longer you are operating at a slower pace. Ideally, we can get through this as quickly as possible, and when we get through it, then the economy can start moving forward again at a faster pace.
But I do want to add one thing, Don, and I think that it's very important for us to recognize that all of the public health modeling and the modeling that was shared with the cabinet yesterday, which released to the public and was shared with the opposition as well, is the fact that if we leave the shelter in place too early, or if we relax the social distancing measures which may put in place that may come afterward too quickly, we might as well not have done anything at all. And that's just the fact. And that's what a lot of countries around the world are grappling with. The plain and simple fact that because of the ability of this virus to spread so quickly, if you do not have these very aggressive measures in place and have to maintain them for a long period of time, maybe not in shelter in place, but other types of aggressive social distancing to ensure that you reduce the amount of transmission which happens inside of your economy, you will be challenged. And so the last thing that we want to do is to open up too quickly, and that will basically mean that all of the sacrifice which we've had over the last 4 weeks, in which will extend to 6 weeks, will be some businesses that have not been able to open for 6 weeks. So when you talk about barbershops and beauty salons and gyms, etc., that is significant. And the last thing we want is for that sacrifice to be in vain. So we're going to be very careful with the public health advice and take a very measured approach, because the last thing we want to do is to eliminate all of the gains in which we've had.
I think it's kind of unfortunate because nobody's really started to come out, no countries really started to come out of it and started to really reopen yet. I mean, a few countries in Europe this last week have started gradually opening, like hardware stores and bicycle shops and that sort of thing, but we don't have any country models to look at to see how opening either too soon or what the right time is to open, because there's just no information by looking at what other people have done at this point, except for China.
But the fact is that I think we have a good public health team. There's modeling that's done. There's modeling that's going to be enhanced. I've offered to the Ministry of Health some assistance of some of our young mathematicians who are looking for extra work. We have a lot of young Bermudians who are back home in quarantine facilities and others that want to do things to be productive. And so from that particular perspective, we will have an opportunity to get this right and to write our own story. But I need to make sure it's clear. And this is the information which we have, and we're going to make sure that we release it to the public. But that's the real challenge. If you come out of this too soon, all of the work, all of the sacrifice that has taken place over the last 4 weeks could be for nothing. And that is the last thing in which we want to do. We're going to have to do this right, and we're going to have to be very careful. We're taking the time to make sure we increase our testing capacity, taking the time to increase the capacity of the healthcare system in order to support persons who may become sick. And so we can have that gradually opening, but we have to make sure that we are careful about it, and we're not going to rush it in the name of the economy. I think there was something that one of my friends sent me today, which was a rather appropriate quote, and he said, "I would rather have a broke family than be rich and no family."
Appropriate. With government's tenants, is there a plan in place to reduce rent, delay rent, scrap the rent form? What's happening with that?
Well, I think the guidance that I would give to government as a landlord would be the same that I would give to those folks in the private sector and folks who rent their homes. You have to have some level of flexibility with respect to your tenants and their circumstances. Those persons who are, by and large, not negatively financially impacted by COVID-19 and who are positioned to be able to kind of meet their obligations should meet their obligations. And those persons who are having some difficulty, there should be some accommodation made for them. It's just the right thing to do.
I don't know who to address this exactly, maybe the Minister of National Security, but I had two business store owners tell me today that 2 days ago that Gosling's and Pitt & Company and Burroughs and Lightbourne were deemed non-essential companies, and that's why they weren't getting any deliveries. Is there any truth to that?
That is a fact. The law is very clear on what is essential and what is not essential, and at this point in time, liquor and cigarette companies are not deemed as essential. The purpose of this shelter in place is to have as minimal activity as possible, and those things are not things which are deemed essential to life. The fact is that there are still supermarkets which are stocked with these various products, but as we move into another period in time, there may be some thoughts to allowing limited restocking of those particular items. But remember, the objective of this is to reduce the amount of persons that are moving in the economy. If you have people that are going to warehouses, they're coming from different homes, they may mix, they may transmit the virus, and that's what we are trying our best to avoid. It does not make sense for us to try to do these things out of convenience when our real goal is to try to suppress transmission of this virus.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, God.
I see you have, sorry, I forgot Minister Keynes. I had a question for Minister Keynes. TNN understands that a customs officer was tested and deemed to be positive for the COVID-19 virus. Has the team of Customs Department been notified? Where was the contact made? Was it through the airport and all those individuals came in? Two, and has the facility or whichever it's taken place been cleaned entirely?
Good afternoon, Trevor. Can you repeat those questions, please?
I understand that a customs officer was tested and results came in positive. Has the Customs Department, has personnel at the Customs Department been notified about the situation? Two, where was the contact made with a lot of individuals coming through the airport within the last 6 weeks? Was the contact made through the airport or elsewhere?
Trevor, a customs officer did test positive for COVID. I will not give you the facility that, I will name the facility. The office that the customs officer worked in was closed. It has been industrially cleaned. He had 3 colleagues that he was working with for safety. Those colleagues have been put in a quarantine facility.
Another question, prison officers are very much bothered by the lack of the boiler at the Westgate, no hot water running. Would this be a potential outbreak? Could it be a potential outbreak in the prisons that might affect officers and inmates alike?
Trevor, the Department of Corrections has a pandemic plan, and they've shared the pandemic plan with our corrections officers and with inmates. For the last year, we've been working desperately to get a boiler on the island. The boiler was a considerable expense, and it took us a time because of a number of sets of circumstances to get the boiler into Bermuda. The boiler was to be installed on March 30th. As a result of the escalation in the COVID virus, that obviously was put on hold. We do accept that in a perfect set of circumstances, we would love for every Bermudian to have hot water in every facility. They do not at the Westgate Correctional Facility. We have spoken and have the acting commissioner has spoken to the Department of Health. They've made it clear that the inmates will be allowed to shower and albeit in cold water, every day. They will be given the opportunity to wash their hands and have access to hand sanitizer. But at the moment, we do not have the benefit of the hot water boiler. But let's be clear, we value every member of our society, even those that are incarcerated. We have a pandemic plan. We have health care officers that are monitoring the Westgate correctional facilities. If we see the situation needs to escalate and we need to isolate, we will do so. But as it stands, everything is under control. The Commissioner of Corrections and our team are monitoring this situation on a regular basis.
Thank you.
All right, as I close, I just want to close out with some good news. The good news is that we did have a shipment of swabs that arrived this evening, and they're going to be tested and validated. And if they pass the testing and validation process, that's certainly going to help to add to our ability to do testing. And that is one of the things that is certainly hopeful. We certainly have the capacity to test, but there are certain parts that's missing. But we did have a shipment of swabs that did arrive this evening, and we'll go over the validation and testing process over the next 24 hours. Just in summary, the Minister of Finance has announced that this government has paid out $8 million to those persons who have been made unemployed over the past 4 weeks. In addition to that, we've announced today of $12 million in assistance in a combination of loans and grants to small and medium-sized businesses through the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation. In addition to that, the vulnerable in our community have been assisted by countless donations of our corporate partners, our international business community, our local business community, who are making sure that money is made available and food and essential items are made available. If you are at home and you are hurting, if you are at home and you are hungry, please do not suffer in silence. Contact the helpline, contact the third sector helpings agencies, or please feel free to send a WhatsApp message to the government WhatsApp. We do not want you to be hungry. We do not want you to suffer, and there are help that is available to all of you. There are many persons who have contacted myself, either on social media, via email, and others, and we are making sure that you get the assistance in which you need and require. The last thing we want to do is for persons to suffer in silence. We are going to get through this together as a country, and I want to thank everyone for their time and attention, and I'll see you here again tomorrow. Good night.
This is a message from the government of Bermuda.
COVID-19, otherwise known as the novel coronavirus, is changing the way we live, work, and do business in Bermuda. It's also changing the way we shop. Here are some tips for grocery shopping during the COVID-19 pandemic. Before you go to the store, consider whether you really need to go shopping. If available, consider delivery options instead. Don't bring the whole family, as only one person from a household is permitted, with the exception of single parents. Don't go if you are feeling unwell or have symptoms. If you are a senior or in another high-risk group, take advantage of senior shopping hours. Wear a mask or cloth face covering when going to the grocery store. Before going into the store, give your hands a good squirt with a sanitizer that contains at least 60% alcohol. Before you touch your card, wipe it down with an antiseptic wipe. Most stores are now offering wipes for this purpose. While you're in the store, stay at least 6 feet away from other shoppers. While you're in the store, touch as few things as possible. Touch only what you buy. Remember to avoid touching your face. At the checkout, stand away from the cashier, and if possible, use the card tap option to pay for items. After leaving the store, give your hands a good squirt with a sanitizer, again, that contains at least 60% alcohol. When you get home, remove your mask or face covering the correct way. Avoid touching mouth, nose, and eyes. Wash your hands immediately after removing. Rinse your produce. It's always a good idea, even when there's no pandemic, to rinse fresh fruit and vegetables with water to remove dirt, debris, and pesticides, and reduce levels of foodborne germs. Don't use soap on your produce. There's no need to use soap or chemical disinfectants on your produce. Wash your hands again after you unpack your groceries. Wash reusable bags. If you use reusable grocery bags, you should wash them after a trip to the store, either by putting them in the laundry for cloth bags or using soap or other disinfectants for plastic bags.
This is a message from the government of Bermuda.